Welcome to Fearless Thinkers, the BTS podcast. My name is Masami Cookson, and our host is Rick Cheatham, head of marketing at BTS. On today's show, Rick sits down with Andrew Burns. Andrew is a vice president at BTS, responsible for partnering with clients to accelerate strategy alignment and culture change initiatives. His work spans the employee lifecycle, from developing assessment centers for hiring and leader development to defining what great leadership looks like within an organization's unique context. Hey Rick, how are you doing today?
Oh, Masami, I'm doing well. We're in the heart of the ridiculous summer heat wave of 2023, and it is rough.
For real. Here in New York, it is absolutely boiling, and also we have the smog from the wildfires in Canada, so it's a double whammy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. At least in Austin, we have a place right in the heart of the city called Barton Springs, which is a natural spring-fed pool that is always 63, 65 degrees, no matter how hot it is. So getting to take a break, get in nature, get in beautiful, clear spring water kind of makes it manageable, at least for a minute or two.
Wow, that sounds like a really amazing oasis in the city.
It is. It's phenomenal. I try to get there early in the morning and swim and meditate as often as I can. It's a beautiful, beautiful spot. Well, actually, that's a great segue, because what Andrew and I were talking about is the whole concept of creating a learning ecosystem and how content, methodology, giving people the opportunity to practice and learn, all in the framework of community and the job that they have to do in the moment and being prepared for the future.
Awesome. Can't wait to hear more.
Hey, Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Of course. What's been going on in your world, man?
Well, we are in the middle of summer. Being a dad of two girls, it's like running from camp to camp, trying to keep them entertained and trying to get the work done at the same time.
I get it. I'm a father of four, but in a very different place in my life. We just did our first wedding about a month and a half ago, so it's always a journey. Well, hey, I am so excited to talk to you today and understand a little bit more about defining and creating a talent ecosystem.
A big part of what we're coming back to again and again is clients' challenge in optimizing their learning ecosystem to be more flexible, to take advantage of the new technologies that existed, and ultimately to create a more robust learning culture. So what is a learning ecosystem? It's all facets that come together to support leaders and people at all levels to share knowledge, to build the capabilities needed to execute their strategy to be more productive and create a better work environment. The reason I use the word ecosystem is to recognize that we have to move out of this controlled, programmatic, episodic approach to learning, where everything is top down, highly structured. It needs to have this flexibility, recognizing there's not a one size fits all. When something gets out of balance within the ecosystem, it's really come down to three elements: developing community, how content is being delivered, and then creating shared experiences. And I'll give you a couple of examples. At the beginning of COVID, there was a big shift to say we need to scale learning and use technology in a new way. And these incredible content libraries came online. But content alone does not deliver the learning objectives that most organizations are trying to achieve, because no one uses content unless it's mandatory. So content alone is just noise in the system. Community by itself creates a lot of sense of connection. However, we also know that if you only isolate community or you over-focus on community, it can actually create no sense of urgency, and engagement wanes very quickly. Because without the content, there's no purpose. And without experiences, there aren't necessarily that opportunity to practice and go deeper. When you only focus on creating learning experiences, it creates an incredible sense of motivation and curiosity. But without that community, without that content to supplement, you often get no accountability to do anything different.
The struggle between how do we create best in class, proven content versus user created content with the amazing sea of information and what's out there. You can just buy whole libraries and put them on the shelf. Help me think through content management and curation best practices.
There is no shortage of content. You search some of these libraries for how to have a feedback conversation and you have 900 results. The fundamental challenge, and I had this with a client, is they had turned on one of these libraries for their 80,000 employees, and they had about 400 monthly active users. The willingness to use it wasn't there. It was too much content. I don't know where to begin. And a lot of it comes down to context. What's the context in which I can use this content? And how can I connect with other like-minded peers or colleagues who are wrestling with the same type of ideas, and ultimately bring it to life through conversation, discussion, practice?
Makes a lot of sense to me. Before I even got into this world at all, I just was like, it's all but cruel for us to give these people new skills, but not show them where in life they're required. I'm curious about how, from your perspective, community fits in, how they really help people to learn and change.
I see communities as the holy grail, if you will, of learning, and one of the hardest, because you can't fake community. I think we've all been in artificial communities where it feels awkward. There's no trust. There's no willingness to engage. You only get out of communities what you put into it. And so the role of the learning organization, if you leave a community up to itself, you will have a drop off. It relies on individuals within that community that are willing to keep it alive. And if you also go to the other side where it's fully monitored by a human, that also doesn't become very sustainable and scalable. Within each organization, comes back to the culture. Our role as a learning organization is to create momentum by giving just enough structure, just enough content for experiences that the communities can run with without needing an outside expert or a PhD to translate this conceptual idea into something that's actionable.
It is funny when you say the Holy Grail. It reminds me of a study around basically what it takes to shift core beliefs. It's nearly impossible for people to shift their core beliefs and what they would do without having conversations with others.
Absolutely. Our approach to creating communities is to focus on mindsets. Community is a forum in which will help people grow and shift and explore different perspectives, whether it's from a leadership mindset, a strategic mindset. Ultimately, having these forums where people can wrestle with these provocative ideas will help reinforce more productive mindsets, because I believe what I hear from people in my community more so than I will from any piece of content. And one of the hardest challenges is focus groups and learner empathy sessions. Everyone will say, I just want the 4-step process. And it's so tempting as a learning organization to say, okay, let me give you the playbook. But if we don't address these underlying root issues, like I can teach you a coaching model until I turn blue in the face. But if you fundamentally don't believe that me spending time deeply investing in their career, I'm never going to do it.
Now let's shift to experiences. What I'm curious about there is this world we live in now of live, virtual, self-paced, all different ways that experiences are created, and making sure that the lens is right for an individual where they are.
It really comes back to this paradox in the business world. Every high-performing team outside of the business world, you think about a sports team, you think about a military, a choir, a symphony, they spend 99% of their time practicing and only 1% actually performing. It's completely the opposite for us in the business world. We spend our time in the flow of work, kind of learning as we going. We so often just kind of throw people into the deep end, whether it's teams or individual leaders, without giving them an opportunity to get feedback. So there's no shortage of how experiences can be created. We need to create the experience that disrupts a mindset that they may have facing a situation. Whether you're using a simulated experience or other mechanisms, helping disrupt creates this rush of like, oh, I didn't think about it this way. I'm willing to try something else. And then when you supplement that with the content that's contextual and rich communities that can sustain and create accountability, That's just the recipe for an incredible growth in both maturity of an organization and maturity of a learning culture for the future.
So just that whole concept of careful practice and preparation allows people to shine versus trying to figure out how to do things for the first time when the challenge arises.
What is the moment where you need to really show up differently? And how can we help people understand what great looks like in that moment, help them practice that, help them get feedback on that? What we're trying to create is this awareness of like, I'm encountering a situation that's going to be really critical for me to get right. I can think back to the experience I had when I practiced it. I can reach out to that community to get additional guidance. And there should be contextual content that I can capture through AI or through recommendation engine.
So all of this to me feels like this cool combination, which it's common sense and at the same time cutting edge. It's one of those things that is familiar and logical as we break down all the pieces, but how we pull it together is where the magic potentially happens.
There's three things that I keep on seeing that get in the way of learning organization. The first thing is programmatic thinking. By the nature of how we're structured, we are looking to break down and prioritize work and assign resources to that. And it is much easier to do that to linear programs that are episodic, predictable. The more programmatic that we become and less agile we are as a learning organization, the more frustrated the individual leaders will become and therefore look elsewhere to access the skills that they need. The second piece is the attractiveness that technology creates that overcomplicate a learning ecosystem. Technology needs to ultimately complement your learning strategy. So often I see organizations fall in love with the technology and then try to match their learning strategy in order to make that technology work. And then the third piece that I can't emphasize enough, it requires really intentional focus of how do I drive continuous engagement. Engagement is a continuous process. If you want people to continuously learn, you have to look for ways to continuously engage. You have to shape things and communicate things in ways that are going to speak to the end of the user and drive awareness and advocacy of that learning ecosystem.
For those that don't have the positional power in their organization to make radical changes in their learning ecosystem today, what's your best advice?
What is the one area of focus that your business leaders or your organization cares about right now? And apply some of these concepts to that. So even though community content experiences can cover a wide gamut of curriculum topics, go deep on one, experiment to get traction. It is much easier to get people to buy into a single area of focus. One example, we have a client who over the last several years has been focused on customer centricity, but they're also starting to see a drop in productivity and accountability. What the senior leaders in that organization is, hey, we need to drive a culture of accountability. One of our clients who didn't have a big budget really started to look at that as like, hey, this is the door that's open right now. How can I latch on and show, here's how we're going to create community and experiences and contextualize content in support of that area of focus. Get creative with it, deliver it into your learning culture, because what works for a software company isn't going to work for an oil and gas company. And so your community content experiences also need to be shaped and contextualized to your learning environment.
Always great advice to stand as close to the business imperative as humanly possible.
It's not always title either. Sometimes the power and influence can sit anywhere in the organization. And so understanding who ultimately has influence, get those folks to advocate, to sponsor, to support the areas that you're focused on. The engagement and others will follow that as well.
Well, hey, thank you, my friend. You've given us a lot to think about. Really appreciate you joining today.
Thanks, Rick. Always a pleasure.
If you'd like to stay up to date on the latest from the Fearless Thinkers podcast, please subscribe. Links to all of the relevant content discussed in today's podcast are in the show notes, or you can always reach us at bts.com. Thanks again.